For decades, motorcycles did not fail from lack of skill. They failed in small moments: a tired hand, a missed shift, a lapse under pressure. Yet the clutch lever remained sacred, treated as the core of control. That assumption is starting to break, because when systems like dual-clutch transmission removed it, they added something else: weight, layers, distance. 2026 is asking a different question. What if less actually delivers more? That is where Yamaha Motor Company changes direction. Y-AMT removes the effort, not the connection. And that shift raises a deeper question. What else has the industry been overcomplicating all along? This is where the misconception starts to collapse. Because Yamaha Y-AMT is not a new transmission. That is the point. Underneath the electronics, it remains a conventional manual gearbox. Same gear sets, same internal layout, the same mechanical foundation riders have trusted for decades. Yamaha Motor Company did not replace that system. They refined what surrounds it. The entire operation comes down to two electric actuators. One manages the clutch, the other executes gear changes. No secondary clutch packs, no alternative power paths, no hydraulic complexity adding mass and failure points. Just a direct layer added onto something already proven. Now consider what that actually means in motion. Instead of coordinating hand and foot, the system performs those same actions with consistent timing, zero fatigue, and precise repetition. Engagement becomes measured. Shifts become exact, not dramatic, controlled. This is where the philosophy separates itself from systems like dual-clutch transmission. One approach solves problems by adding components. The other removes unnecessary variables entirely. And the result is measurable. The full Y-AMT system adds roughly 6.1 pounds. That figure is not just light, it is strategic. Because every added pound affects handling, balance, and responsiveness in ways riders feel immediately, not just on paper. This is what disciplined engineering looks like. Not chasing complexity, but minimizing it without sacrificing function. Fewer components reduce long-term wear points. Simpler architecture lowers service demands. And critically, it keeps the machine accessible, not just to purchase, but to maintain. That is where the real advantage begins to surface. Because riders do not live with concepts. They live with machines that must perform consistently, day after day, mile after mile. A system can look advanced in isolation, but its value is defined by how it behaves over time. And that naturally leads to the next question. Not how Y-AMT works, but where it actually proves itself in the real world. Now, if this kind of straight, no hype breakdown is exactly how you like to understand motorcycle tech, go ahead, hit that like button, drop a hype, and subscribe. That is what keeps this channel focused on real-world logic, not marketing noise. Engineering alone does not prove anything. It only matters when it leaves the lab and survives real ownership. That is where the conversation becomes tangible. Because Yamaha MT-07 is where Y-AMT moves from theory into daily use. And that decision is deliberate. The MT-07 has never been about extremes. It earns its place through balance, manageable power, low weight, approachable cost, and a reputation for reliability that appeals to both new riders and seasoned ones. It is not a halo machine. It is a real-world platform. So when Yamaha Motor Company introduces Y-AMT here, the message is clear. This system is not reserved for premium flagships. It is built to scale, built to live in the segment where most riders actually spend their time. That changes the stakes, because now this is no longer an abstract idea. It becomes a purchase decision, a machine you could realistically own, one that retains the simplicity the MT-07 is known for, while quietly removing layers of rider workload. That is where the value becomes visible. Instead of pushing riders toward heavier, more expensive platforms just to experience clutchless operation, systems often associated with dual-clutch transmission, Yamaha places that experience into a category where weight, cost, and usability still matter. And that builds credibility. Because simplicity is not easy to preserve when new technology is introduced. It is easy to add features. It is much harder to integrate them without disturbing what made the motorcycle work in the first place. The MT-07 does not hide complexity, it exposes it. If something feels unnatural, riders notice immediately. If weight increases, handling changes. If systems interfere, confidence drops. The fact that Y-AMT fits here without disrupting that balance says more than any specification sheet. It suggests the system is not experimental, it is resolved. But practicality only answers part of the equation. Riders do not choose motorcycles based on logic alone. They respond to feel, how a machine reacts, how it communicates, how it behaves when pushed. And that is where the next layer becomes critical. Because removing effort is one thing, replacing it with the right sensation is something else entirely. At this point, I want to hear from you. Have you actually ridden a bike with an automated system like this? Or are you still on a traditional manual? Drop your experience in the comments because real rider. Feedback matters more than spec sheets when we are talking about systems like Y-AMT. This is where the expectation around automatic motorcycles quietly falls apart. Because what Yamaha has built here does not behave the way riders have been conditioned to expect. Most systems that remove the clutch also remove something else: feedback, connection, intent. Yamaha does not, Y-AMT does not feel like a scooter. It does not drift into softness, and it does not separate the rider from the machine in the name of convenience. What it delivers instead is something far more deliberate. It feels mechanical, not in the old sense of levers and cables, but in the way each shift arrives with purpose. There is a defined moment, a transition you can anticipate, feel, and trust. The gearbox still speaks. The difference is, you are no longer speaking to it with your foot in your left hand. You are speaking through your fingers, and that shift in control changes everything, because fingers operate faster, shorter movement, less interruption, a direct line between decision and execution. The delay that once existed between intention and action begins to disappear. What replaces it is immediacy, a response that feels almost predictive, even when it is not. That is where the character of Y-AMT begins to move closer to something rarely discussed in road motorcycles. Not touring comfort, not commuter ease, but high-level control philosophy, where minimal input produces maximum effect. The rider is no longer occupied with managing the process. That energy is redirected toward what actually defines performance, braking precision, throttle discipline, and line selection under pressure. But the real transformation is happening beneath that surface, because Y-AMT is not simply reacting to rider input. It is interpreting the environment the motorcycle is operating in: lean angle, throttle position, brake pressure, load transfer. Each input feeds into a system that is constantly adjusting its behavior in real time. It holds gears when stability matters. It responds sharply when acceleration is demanded. It smooths transitions when traction becomes uncertain. This is not a fixed personality, it is a situational one. And that distinction is critical, because many automatic systems achieve consistency by reducing variation, by smoothing everything into predictability. Yamaha takes a different path. It allows variation to exist, but organizes it, shapes it, keeps it working in the rider's favor instead of removing it entirely. The rider is not taken out of the equation. The rider is sharpened. There is less physical workload, but greater control over outcome. Less distraction, but more awareness. And once that balance settles in, the experience stops feeling like assistance. It starts feeling like an advantage. And that is where the pressure begins to build. Because once a system delivers this level of responsiveness, without adding weight, without adding bulk, without adding mechanical complication, it forces a much harder question. Not how it compares in theory, but how anything built on a heavier, more complex foundation is supposed to keep up when the road actually demands it. Now let us make this real. If you have tried Honda's DCT or even considered it, I want your honest take. Did the weight or feel ever bother you? Or did it work perfectly for your riding style? Leave a comment, because this is exactly where opinions split. And that is where the real insight comes from. And while you are there, like the video and subscribe if this helped you think differently about what really matters. Now the conversation stops being theoretical, because this is where Yamaha's Y-AMT moves out of the interesting category and into something far more uncomfortable for the rest of the industry. it becomes disruptive. Set it directly against Honda and its dual-clutch transmission, and the gap is not cosmetic, it is structural, built into the architecture. Impossible to ignore once you look past branding. Start with the variable that governs everything else. Weight. Honda's DCT system introduces roughly 22 pounds of additional mass. Y-AMT operates at just over 6 pounds. That is not a marginal difference. That is a shift in how the motorcycle behaves under acceleration, under braking, and most critically, during direction changes. Extra mass does not sit quietly. It influences balance, it resists transitions, it asks more from the rider in every corner entry and every correction midline. On a performance-focused street bike, those effects are immediate, not theoretical, felt within the first few minutes of riding. Then comes packaging. DCT is not a simple add-on. It requires dual clutch assemblies, hydraulic control systems, and additional internal hardware that expands the physical footprint of the engine. The motorcycle becomes wider. Integration becomes more restrictive. Ergonomics are no longer purely rider-focused. They are partially dictated by the system itself. Yamaha avoids that entirely. By retaining the original gearbox layout, Y-AMT preserves the motorcycle's natural proportions: narrow, compact, uncompromised. The kind of form that allows a bike to feel intuitive before it even starts moving. Now step deeper into complexity. DCT is an engineering achievement, no question, but it is also layered. Hydraulic circuits, oil pressure management, multiple clutch packs working in coordination. More components mean more heat, more wear points, and more long-term variables that require attention. Y-AMT takes a different route. Electric actuation, reduced mechanical load paths, fewer friction surfaces. The system does not fight complexity. It refuses to introduce it in the first place. Maintenance becomes simpler. Ownership becomes more predictable. The cost is not just lower at purchase, it remains controlled over time. And then there is something riders rarely quantify, but immediately notice: low-speed behavior. Without a traditional clutch, many dual-clutch systems can feel vague when maneuvering in tight spaces. Parking lots, slow traffic, precise control becomes less intuitive, more dependent on software interpretation than rider input. Y-AMT restores that sense of control. It behaves closer to a manual system, only without the physical demand. The rider regains clarity at low speeds without sacrificing convenience at higher ones. So this is not a question of which system is more advanced on paper. It is a question of which system solves the problem without introducing new compromises. Yamaha simplifies, Honda compensates, and outperforming one of the most established systems in the segment would already be enough to shift the conversation. But it does not end there, because beyond Honda sits another philosophy entirely, one that approaches automation from a completely different direction. Beating Honda proves a point, but it does not close the argument. Because if Honda defines mainstream execution, then BMW Motorrad represents something else entirely. Premium engineering, different priorities, different assumptions. And that is where their answer enters the picture: ASA. On the surface, it aligns perfectly with what you would expect from German design. Refined integration, layered control, a system that blends into the riding experience so smoothly it almost disappears. But that is not an accident. It is the result of a very specific objective. ASA is not built for aggression, it is built for distance. Long-range touring, extended saddle hours, stability when the road stretches beyond the horizon. In that environment, the goal is not to make shifting faster. It is to make it less noticeable, less intrusive, something that fades into the background while the rider focuses on comfort and consistency. That is the philosophy, and it immediately separates it from what Yamaha is doing. Because Y-AMT is not trying to hide the act of shifting, it is trying to refine it. BMW maintains the traditional structure. Foot input remains. The rider still interacts with the system in a familiar way, only now assisted. It becomes a hybrid experience, part manual, part automated, comfortable, predictable, but not fully optimized for rapid input or precision under pressure. Yamaha moves further. Control shifts entirely to the hands. No foot involvement. Every command travels through the fingers, where reaction time is shorter and communication is cleaner. The interface feels less like a mechanical process and more like a direct connection. Immediate, intentional, unfiltered. And once again, the underlying philosophy reveals itself through the hardware. ASA achieves smoothness by adding layers, additional systems, expanded integration, increased cost. It is premium in execution, but also heavier and designed for a category where that added mass does not conflict with the mission. Y-AMT removes layers, fewer components, reduced weight, sharper focus. It is not simplified for the sake of cost, it is simplified for the sake of response. Everything unnecessary is stripped away, so the remaining system can operate with clarity. So the comparison is not about which system is superior in isolation, it is about alignment. One is optimized for covering distance with minimal effort. The other is optimized for controlling performance with maximum precision. And once that distinction becomes clear, the outcome stops being about specifications. It becomes about intent. Because outperforming both Honda and BMW does not happen by accident. It points to something deeper, something built into the way this system was conceived from the beginning. And that is where the real advantage starts to reveal itself. Quick pause. If you like this kind of breakdown, hit that like button. And if you want to go deeper and support the channel, you can become a member for early access to upcoming videos before anyone else sees them. At this point, the comparison stops being technical and starts becoming philosophical, because this is no longer just about choosing between Y-AMT, DCT, or ASA. It is about choosing between two ways of thinking. On one side, there is momentum driven by visibility, more features layered on top of each other, more complexity presented as progress, systems designed to look advanced, to sound impressive, and to justify a higher price point. But that direction carries consequences. Additional weight that changes how a bike responds in motion. Additional systems that introduce more long-term variables. Additional cost that extends far beyond the showroom floor. These trade-offs are rarely obvious at first, but they accumulate. On the other side is a quieter approach, one that prioritizes function over appearance. This is where Yamaha Motor Company draws a clear line. Instead of chasing the largest solution, the focus was on the most effective one. A simpler question guided the process. How do you improve the riding experience without increasing the burden on the machine or the rider? The answer was not expansion, it was reduction. Less mass influencing acceleration and handling. Less mechanical complexity, creating future uncertainty. Less financial pressure across long-term ownership. But this is not about doing less for the sake of it. It is about discipline. Because refinement requires restraint. Improving an existing system without overcomplicating it demands more control than starting from scratch. It requires confidence in what already works and precision in making it better. That is what defines intelligent investment. Looking past surface-level innovation and asking what truly delivers over time. And once that perspective settles in, the outcome begins to form on its own, quietly but with increasing clarity. Because when efficiency, simplicity, and performance all point in the same direction, the final judgment becomes less about preference and more about recognition. After breaking down the architecture, comparing real-world behavior, and testing where each system actually delivers value, the conclusion settles into something difficult to ignore. Y-AMT is not chasing dominance through complexity. It achieves it through restraint. At just over 6 pounds, it removes the single biggest penalty most automatic systems carry: excess mass. And that reduction is not theoretical. It shows up immediately in how a motorcycle turns, settles, and responds under load. Lighter systems preserve agility. They protect the very character performance bikes are built around. At the same time, Yamaha Motor Company keeps the mechanical structure simple. Fewer components mean fewer long-term wear points, lower service demands, and a more predictable ownership experience. Not just easier to ride, easier to live with. But the defining difference is not weight or maintenance. It is feel. Y-AMT does not isolate the rider. It stays connected. Inputs remain deliberate. Feedback remains clear. The experience stays engaging in a way most automated systems gradually lose. And when those factors come together, mass control, mechanical simplicity, and rider connection, the outcome becomes less of an opinion and more of a direction. This is the Iron Pulse standard, where efficiency, control, and real-world usability are engineered to work together, not traded against each other. And once that conclusion becomes clear, the decision stops being complicated. It becomes practical, which naturally brings us to the next step, what this actually means for you as a rider in the real world. Stop struggling with a heavy clutch in traffic. Stop carrying unnecessary weight just to save your left hand. That is not compromise. That is limitation. And what is logic? Logic is choosing systems that are lighter, simpler, and built to improve the actual riding experience. That is exactly what we break down here on Iron Pulse. We do not chase hype. We break down what works, what does not, and why it matters, so you can see the difference clearly before making a decision. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I will see you in the next one.